So we have a sign that's been in our yard since COVID, and the sign says faith over fear. So August 14th of 2023, I got a phone call from the doctor's office, and they said they had found a suspicious mass, and they needed me to come in for more testing. So of course, that kind of phone call is a little bit scary. So went through the day. It was meet the teacher day, so had to finish all the last minute preparations for that. And then I came home expecting Grant to, just be comforting and just, not feeling sorry for me, but basically feeling sorry for me. And I come home and he wants us to go for a little ride on our golf cart. So we go for a ride, and I'm expecting, all these lovey-dovey, I'm so sorry you're, going through this. And but what he says was, it basically started the whole course of how we lived out this last year. He said, that sign in our yard that we've had, he said, we are going to live by what the sign says. We're not going to have fear. And at this point, we didn't know my diagnosis yet. So he said, we are going to live by faith and trust God. So then I went in for a biopsy on September 5th. And then 2 days later, I was at work and got a phone call from the doctor's office saying that it was cancer. I was diagnosed with invasive ductal carcinoma, and it was stage 1. And we just knew that we were going to trust God, no matter what came.
Whenever she was diagnosed with that, I think a lot of people expected us to kind of fall apart. But I thank God, one of the ways that he really showed his love towards us in that was really, if you go back a few years ago, he began preparing us, kind of preparing our hearts, preparing our minds, preparing our spirit for what Jody was about to go through. 3 years ago, one of the things that we try to do as a family is every year around New Year's, we try to pick a word that we're going to meditate through the year, pick a verse that we're going to learn and meditate on throughout the year. And 3 years ago, I had chose, in fact, at that time we said, let's pick a word that starts with the same letter as our first name. And so that's kind of how we did this as a family. And so I picked gratitude. And I just wanted to focus that year on being grateful. And I really did that. So every day, I spent multiple times a day just thanking God for everything in my life that he had done. And I didn't know it at the time, but that was building a foundation of thankfulness in my spirit. And then God used that later whenever this happened, being able to just be thankful, even in that moment, just created peace for me. And I can remember one of the early days in that where we had been to the doctor. It was very overwhelming, a lot of doctor's appointments that day, a lot of emotion. We were in 2 separate cars that day, and I remember driving home in my truck on I-40 heading back to Bushland, and I can remember in that moment just being broken, being upset. But I heard God ask me in my truck, I heard him say, "Can you be thankful today?" And in that moment, with tears in my eyes and just being very upset, I was still able to verbally tell God, "Thank you. Thank you for everything you've done."
My word that year was joy. And I, like you did every day, I tried multiple times a day to, even through everything, even when it was hard. And this was pre-diagnosis, it was around COVID and things were crazy. But just to have joy in everything. Even the little things, like even something so silly as going to the grocery store. Like, I am so thankful that I can go to the grocery store, and I can have joy even when it's hard. I can vividly remember a time I had just had surgery. I was about 2 weeks out, very uncomfortable and lots of pain, but I wanted to go to church. I still had some surgical drains that were in, and we just didn't think it was probably a good idea for me to go. So Grant and Gavin and Gentry, they left for church. And I'm sorry. I stayed home, and I was kind of in just a sad spot throughout the whole diagnosis and treatment. I just felt sad. I knew that the Lord was with me, and I knew that I could trust Him and His promises were real. But in that moment when they left, I wanted to feel gratitude because I knew praising Him was what, I was supposed to be doing no matter what.
And we've talked about this often. There were so many people that would come up and to Jody or to me or both of us, and they would, like to me specifically, and they would say, "Hey, how's Jody doing?" And I'd be like, "Hey, she's doing really good. Here's what God's doing. Here's some blessings. Here's some things we've seen." And they would kind of like pause and be like, "But how is she really doing?" And they're like, "No, she really is. She's doing good." And for a lot of people, it was hard for them to understand. I think there were people that saw you at church and people that saw you at school, maybe people that even saw you like online, right? Things that you would post. But one thing that was really special to me is the Jody that I saw at home was that same Jody. And so it was, when people came up and asked me, "How's she doing?" Like you really were doing good, And I think that just created such a peaceful environment for our kids, people around us, even our family. In regards to our kids, I would say that that was one of the hardest parts of this, was the day that Jody did get her diagnosis. We wanted to make sure that the kids heard that from us. And so we took them out of school early, and telling our kids what was going on was difficult. It was very emotional, and that was hard. But our kids were amazing.
They were so wonderful. They just adapted so well. I remember them coming in, because I was in the bedroom in a chair for a long couple weeks, in a recliner. And they would come in and just love on me. Gentry would write me notes, and she wrote me a couple poems, and Gavin would come in and do silly things to make me laugh.
Help you with your cold cap.
Yeah, help me with the cold cap. Stuff. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, they were so great. I feel like they definitely grew spiritually.
We were actually very proud of our kids during that time, because like us, we were very transparent and open with them about treatments and different things that were going on. There was no question that was off the table. They could ask us anything, we would answer. And I think they handled it really well. And I don't recall, maybe there was some that I don't really remember, but I don't recall even them living in fear over this. So I think God even kind of shielded them, or even helped them in their faith to trust Him with you.
Yeah.
That's how it seemed from parents looking at them anyway.
Yeah.
When you get married, you have your marriage vows, right? Your marriage vows, sickness and in health. This is what sickness looks like.
Right.
And so to walk through that together. But I also I was just thinking about this. I think actually today I was thinking about this. And I think in a marriage, the formula that God gives us, or the plan that God gives us for marriage to be successful, is very simple. I think it's our sinful nature that gets in the way of that and messes that up, right? But I think the way that I would summarize that would be, God calls husbands to love your wife. That's the plan. Husbands, love your wife. And I think for the wives, He says, make it easy for your husband to love you. And that's kind of the formula for that. And so I think we do our best to follow that.
We're
try
not
to,
perfect, for
no,
sure.
not at all. But I try to love you, and you make it easy for me to love you. And maybe the kids see that and follow suit a little bit.
Not everything was easy. We made it look easy, but it wasn't. But that was the Lord. That was just the Lord who got us through all of it. He was so good to us. He blessed us with so many people around us. We have such a great community of people. Sweet family who surrounded us with prayer and just love the entire time. So many people who just loved on us from the church and from work, and just people who came out of the woodworks. But some of the most encouragement came from people who were going through hard things too. There were some of our friends who, were going through hard things, and they took the time to reach out and encourage us, even though they were going through difficult things. So we thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and I don't know if all those people necessarily knew at the time, but like God was loving on you and loving on us through them. And there were so many men that I can remember would, have a coffee with me or lunch with me or call me once a month or text me once a day or send me a verse or send me a song that they had found or whatever it was that made them think of me. And to your point, a lot of them were going through the same thing or harder things.
Right.
But like God was just loving on us through those people. And that was pretty cool.
Yeah. So my very first surgery was on October 25th. And it was a pretty major surgery. And I was nervous about it. I didn't have fear, but I was just anxious about it. Like, never had surgery. I've seen all the medical shows, and heard people having surgery and all of that, but never myself had I ever been in a surgery. So we had some friends come over a couple days before surgery, and they prayed over us, and we got to have that sweet love of Jesus shared over us. But right before that, the Lord had shown me something really cool. As I was praying and meditating, just thinking about the surgery and thinking about what was to come, and those thoughts of, those anxious feelings, the Lord just revealed to me that He was always going to be with me. He actually showed me an image of me in the hospital, actually on the surgery table, and He was standing there right beside me holding my hand. I can vividly see Him standing there holding my hand, and then I see the surgeon coming in, and then I look over in the corner and Jesus is just standing there, just smiling at me saying, you have a bright future. There's so much more to come. I have you going through this for whatever reason, but I'm here with you.
And I think that conversation we had about faith over fear was so important. And I think looking back, it was more important than what we knew at the time. But it was kind of like we put a flag in the sand, and we kind of claimed that territory, and we said, this is like Jesus's ground. Like this is where the battle will be fought, but we're fighting from a place of victory. And so because we went into it knowing that, we had like this peace about that. Like there were going to be hard days, there were going to be anxious days, there were going to be things that we had to deal with in that, but knowing that we were fighting from victory and we weren't going to let the enemy take that ground.
Yep.
I think it made it easier, but also what that did is it allowed us to just watch for God. And we weren't talking about what ifs, thinking about bad things. We weren't, trying to be victims in this, but instead we were going to look for God to show up. And I can remember early on in this, it almost became a game with family and friends around us, where it was like every time something would happen that was unexplainable, like we would just say, there's God. You know, God just showed up in that.
Yep.
And we have dozens, if not hundreds, of examples or
So
stories
many
that we could
examples.
share where because we were fighting from a spot in faith instead of fear, and we knew that God loved us and we had peace in that, that it almost became fun to watch for what God was going to do during that
We looked
time.
for those opportunities, like even just the smallest things, you know. I loved going to the grocery store during that time, going around people that had no idea what I was going through, because I knew deep down inside that I was going through something. And so it kind of makes you look at the world different. Like the people around you, what are they going through? Like, how can I pray for them? How can I, you know, reach out and encourage them? Even going to the doctor's offices, you know, some of the nurses are, you know, happy and joyful, and some of them aren't. And the Lord would reveal to us, you know, like, this person might need you to pray over them. This person might need extra love today, or just a joke, you know, something just to bring them joy.
This year, the word that I chose and the verse that I chose, the word was endurance. And this simply came from, I was very naive in thinking that you were going to have one surgery. This was all going to be over in 30 days. I was thinking by Christmas it would just be a memory. And then we quickly found out that it was going to be a year-long battle, if not more. And so in January, I chose the word endurance. And the verse, which a lot of people know and a lot of people would kind of equate to like sports or things like that, is in Hebrews. And it says, let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. And that just took on such a deeper meaning for me this year. And as I look at that, you know, the race is our life, and we're running this race, we're living this life. But the word endurance, I just thought about that word a lot, and the word endurance literally means to endure. And endure means it's gonna be hard, and you just keep going. And the way that we keep going is we have to look at Jesus. And so that's kind of my encouragement to people this year is, you know, think about that. Think about it is hard. God doesn't promise us it's going to be easy, but there are other things he does promise us. He promises to love us. He promises to give us peace beyond understanding. And if we look to Jesus, that's going to help us endure through those hard times.
Yep. And he's never changing. That's something that was easy to meditate on too, was his word is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. My word this year was jubilation. And that simply means celebration. So I knew that this year was going to be a year of celebration, finishing all of my cancer treatments. My surgeries are finally over. I'm done with radiation. I went through chemo and I finished that. I did a cold capping to save my hair, and I did it. I survived cancer. And because of the community around me and because of God and just how great he is. So I get to celebrate. This is my year of Jubilee. So
That's good.
Super excited about that.
Be a great next year.
Yes, it will. It's going to be wonderful.